So, Space Gap, this week we did a longer one and it's sort of extra credit. It is about Project Serpo and with my friend Chris Lang, who has been into the topic of extraterrestrials, space lore, etc. And here we go. Enjoy. So, we're going to talk about Serpo, Project Serpo. And so I looked into it and I asked my friend at ChatGPT to please, what are the main points of the Serpo, of the Project Serpo to include in an investigation? And ChatGPT has responded with some items. Um, so Project Serpo is a controversial an intriguing tale that has captivated UFO and conspiracy theory enthusiasts for years. It allegedly details a top secret exchange program between the United States government and an alien planet, Serpo, in the Zeta Reticuli star system. Here are the main points to consider when investigating or discussing. So, Serpo, number one, origins and disclosure. What would you say about that?
Well, apparently this story's been floating around forever. Linda Moulton Howe apparently knew something about this story, like it back as far as the 80s. But it all really came out, I guess, in 2005. There's there's a UFO discussion board on the internet that had been at that time. I don't even know if it still exists, but
Wow.
at the time, all of a sudden, this mysterious dude appears and starts posting information, and he basically says, like, I worked for one of those three-letter intelligence agencies and I was involved in all these secret programs around alien stuff. But he won't identify his name or his actual rank or what actual place he worked for. But he spun this like crazy yarn over like probably about 30 or 40 posts, some of them fairly long. When you print it out now, it's about 40 pages of reading.
Is that all?
Yeah, it's about that.
Okay.
I mean, at least when I in the version I currently have it.
Okay.
So
Yes.
anyway,
Okay. Yeah.
he tells this story
Mhm.
of there being it all goes back to Roswell,
Okay.
and his thing is basically, yeah, Roswell is real. It actually happened. The story that's out there is a little bit wrong because there was actually two Roswell crashes, not just one.
Mhm.
So, and the upshot of it was that they got five dead bodies of aliens, but they got one live one, and they sort of
boy.
like they kind of made buddies with him. He lived with the Americans
Yes.
for like 6 or 7 years. They called him EB1.
EBE1.
EBE1, and EBE standing for extraterrestrial biological entity. So they were very creative in their naming, but that's how we have the Ebens.
Yes.
Because this guy was an Eben, and like those Ebens, like they're like solid dudes or dudettes. It's hard to tell, but they have females, so you never really know.
Yeah.
But they look the same. So to us humans, they all kind of look the same. But anyway, so he kind of made friends with the American government. They learned to talk to him, and he told them that in his crashed ship there was basically like a phone home, like alien phone home radio.
Yeah.
That they and they
And
helped him get it, and they helped him like get it working, and he got to communicate like with his home planet, like from like 50s like Earth, like being kept at a military base. So basically, yeah, he contacted his people, and they agreed to come and get him. And basically, the upshot of this, how this leads to Serpo, is they like a few years. I think actually, EBE1 dies in 1952 of natural causes. So the Ebens didn't make it in time to get rescue him.
Right.
Like he died before they
Right.
could rescue him. But what happened is that the EBE-1 essentially taught
The handler or the
taught the humans how to communicate with him. Right?
Yes.
So they found a way. Like he learned enough English. They deciphered some of he taught them their written alphabet.
Wow.
And they understand that a bit better. The Ebens have this bizarre speech thing where it's sort of all tones.
And okay.
So that's what it sounds like to humans, but it's like a language really of tones. And it's like some people say that the whole do 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 like in 2000 Close Encounters.
Yes.
Is a bit of a shout out to that. Because those aliens were speaking in tones, whereas the Ebens, that are the real ones,
yes,
that they have this musical language where it's all tone. And interestingly enough, at the very end of Close Encounters, when the UFO is coming down on Devil Mountain or whatever, they show the Serpo crew going into the UFO.
That's right.
There's a group of
you told me that.
There's
oh my gosh, that's right. And you see them, and they're in the awesome jumpsuits.
Yeah, and they give the main guy his own jumpsuit, and he gets to go with them, right?
Good, I know.
So that apparently, Spielberg knew about the Serpo story, and it was totally built into that whole deal. And so anyway, EBE-1 is dead, but the Earth people are still in contact with the Ebens over the radio somehow.
Yeah.
This probably took thousands of scientists and lots of millions of dollars and whatever. Somehow this all happened.
The Yellow Book, did they not? Or did
not yet.
Oh.
So EBE-1's dead. They're talking to the aliens on the radio.
Yeah.
Then the aliens come.
Right.
And then they give them the Yellow Book, which probably we should explain what the Yellow Book is.
Yes, maybe.
It's definitely part of this story.
Crucial.
Yeah. So anyway,
kids, there's
Yellow
a lot
Book.
to learn here.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I can tie this in.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, when the Ebens, they come to Earth and they have a summit, with the leaders of Earth. Apparently, the Americans were kind of cool and did invite people like the leaders of Russia and China and the Vatican, strangely enough.
Yes.
To meet with these people. So anyway, the Ebens are telling us, well, buddy, we've been coming to your planet for thousands of years. We've basically been monitoring your development for thousands of years. And here's this weird holographic book thing that has your whole history, Earth, your history, we recorded on our technology for thousands of years. And it's the guy on the forum sort of implies, but doesn't actually say, that 2,000 years ago they sent a special human clone down to help us with developing society.
Didn't they?
The implication being that it's Jesus.
Oh,
but
my gosh.
Without saying that, but you never know. And apparently you can see the whole Jesus thing on the Yellow Book, which is freaky. Apparently you can actually see footage of the fucking crucifixion and all the Jesus-y stories, apparently. I don't know. I mean, that's yet to be confirmed. Not like the Yellow Book is really public.
They have remote viewed such things. However, okay, correct. Continue, sir.
Yeah. So anyway, the other thing that they negotiated on this big first super summit, the thing they had, was that we should do an exchange program. And apparently it was EBE-1's idea. Oh, and he'd been talking to his alien buddies about it. So when the alien buddies came, they wanted all the other bodies, and they wanted EBE-1's body too, so they could take it back to their planet. So that was one of the reasons they were there.
Oh, they retrieved the body.
That was one of the reasons for their trip. Yes. But anyway, they agree on this idea of an exchange program.
Right.
And they say, well, we're not quite ready to do it yet. We'll come back in 4 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they come back again, I believe, in 4 years. And they say, we're not quite ready. We're going to come.
Year.
Yeah, then they're going to come back 1 year after that.
Yes.
And that
to prepare.
Well, it's apparently the Earth people had their team prepared for a couple of years at that point. They thought it was going
And
to happen quicker than it actually
yes,
did.
they did. I know.
So they were more than
sort of
ready
full,
and
but-
probably over prepared by the time
Correct.
it all actually went down. But basically, the story is that it went down in 1965, and this was, it was in the era after the Kennedy assassination. Apparently, Lyndon Johnson was briefed on the program and did get the go ahead as to like, yeah, we're going to do this exchange thing.
Yes.
So yeah, they'd assembled this team of 12 people to go, and they were all military, and they were specifically in different specialities. Like they were like army guys and military people, but also like various kinds of scientists. And they had to be people with no kids, no huge ties to family. They kind of knew that they would be going away at least for 10 years, probably longer, and also possibly to never return. Like, they were stepping out into the unknown, obviously.
Correct.
So, yeah, so they had this team. They were all ready. So, yeah, they finally come back and they scoop up the people and they go off. And they have like, they thought they brought 10 years worth of military rations to eat.
Yeah. They run out.
And they brought a bunch of dumbass shit like primitive 1960s electronics of various sorts and guns and like...
Yes. They did use...
The gun. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like the Ebens knew they had all this shit. So
yeah,
like,
they said they could
apparently
do it.
It was not a big deal. The Ebens are pretty chill. It's amazing. And that's another side of this story that is kind of like them Ebens, like they're better than us.
Oh, yeah.
Like they are what we should be. They are so cool and they're so chill and they're so like...
But...
They're so mature in their sort of like not sweating the small stuff kind of attitude, like they're very serious, but they also seem to be fairly accommodating to fairly freaky humans, and like showed a real maturity, I think, in the way they dealt with the humans. Like
they bent over backwards to try to make it work for them, and on the other hand. In the book, Lancastrian book, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo,
which you're holding in your hands at this very moment.
And he felt that, in fact, the Ebens were living in a quasi-militaristic style, and some were allowed to be more advanced. Which sounds a little, but unusual things happen.
Yeah,
and even the fact that they can, that's a long journey.
Well, one of the stories that really comes to my mind when it comes to that is like a couple years in, one of their people dies in an accident, and one of the people actually died on the way to Serpo in the spaceship. Apparently, he had some kind of crazy heart attack when he was in his crash, like speed pod or whatever they were. His sort of seat module thing for the spaceship. But basically, a second guy died in some crazy accident.
Okay.
And it was like nobody's fault. Nobody was pissed about it. But what happened is the Ebens took the body away to examine, and it turned out that they were making a clone of the guy. Yeah. And they told the humans about it. Yeah. And like, some of them got like super freaked out and super angry, especially one guy who was not like the leader. He was sort of like top scorer guy, like one of his main guys, but not the leader.
All right.
And he
Commander,
just,
they called him.
Yeah, but there was one guy who was the top ranked kind of person leading like this whole thing, even though it was a crazy trip to a crazy planet. Like it was also a military operation. They were all military. They had ranks. They had a whole kind of military discipline, decorum thing going on, apparently. Like that was part of the deal. Like that was important to them. So anyway, this guy freaks out, and he actually goes as far as like smacking one of the Ebens, and the Ebens get like really angry, and it's sort of like the head Eben of the town is basically saying, you guys are a problem, you've got to go away, and everything's really tense. What happens is that there was this one Eben that they basically named Eben 2.
Yes.
Because she was a she.
Yes.
And she was sort of like their main liaison.
Yes, correct.
And she could actually chirp out a good approximation of English.
Yes.
To the point where they could communicate.
Right.
and she was probably one of the better English speaking Ebens. Like there was a bunch
Yes.
of them. So anyway, she's able to smooth it out, like
And they're
with the
lucky
leadership.
for that
Yeah,
inspiration.
yeah, exactly. But basically, yeah, like the Ebens, they figured it out and they realized that we were just being freaks and like
Yeah, they didn't
like
understand
we were
thing.
gonna chill out. Like so they let us chill out.
Yeah, I can't
Us, I
believe
mean,
we
being the
slapped
humans, not
somebody.
actually
What
us,
are
but
we
yeah.
doing? Oh, gosh.
So yeah,
Gosh. Oh, but they also the Ebens requested that they may go anywhere they like on the planet, which was too high.
yeah, like 110 degrees on a cool day.
Yes.
130 degrees. This is Fahrenheit.
And they had to wear
on a bad day.
sunglasses.
Yeah,
all the
radiation
time.
from the sun. Apparently, most of them died young because because of all the radiation they got on Serpo. Like, apparently, the last one died in 2002.
Oh wow! And wow?
And I'm not quite.
Wow,
I haven't done the math to really get in my head
Yeah,
around exactly what
yeah.
generation they would have been or how
Yeah.
old they would have been. But my impression from what I read is that
They-
they didn't live into their 90s. Like they were
No,
probably
certainly not.
dying in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah, those that came back.
Yeah. Yeah, because basically 2 died and 2 decided to stay. They didn't want to come back to Earth, and like they weren't made to, so they stayed there. And the interesting thing
They
that I
kept
learned
up-
from
okay,
the comic
okay.
book is that one of the guys who chose to stay was the guy who got into the fight with the Ebens over the first dead clone guy.
Oh, isn't it? Now,
And
see,
like, and he said to his boss, who was the leader of the thing, and this was in the comic book, which I didn't
I
actually
think we
get.
should refer to him as Commander.
Yeah.
They
Anyway.
do in the book.
Okay, well then it's more definitive than I am. So yeah, that's totally good. But anyway, there's a touching scene in the comic book where the guy who'd caused all that trouble years later deciding to stay basically was a touching scene where he's telling his boss, like, basically, I was so wrong. These guys are so lovely. They've changed my life. They've changed my world. I just want to stay here. I don't want to go back to stupid old Earth.
Wow.
Like, the Ebens are just so cool. I was so wrong. I looked at them the wrong way, and now I understand. And it was just sort of beautiful moment.
It is. I feel
So, interesting
intense
enough.
about it.
Yeah, so the comic book
That's
exists.
beautiful, really.
And it's basically a comic book sort of telling of the Serpo story, but it does have a foreword by one of the original OGs of the Serpo story, the guy who ran the Serpo website, and I'm forgetting his name, but basically he was one of the Project Camelot people, Bill something.
Oh.
Anyway, he writes the foreword for the comic book.
Oh, I printed all this out. Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can inject
we will,
later,
we will.
or we can patch up on
We're
part
getting
2
close.
and
Okay.
So, yeah. So anyway, the Serpo comic book is good, but what I've noticed about the Serpo sources as I've sussed them, like I kind of consider the original posts by the anonymous poster on the web forum to be kind of like what I can think I understand about the Serpo story. But Len Kasten, the guy who wrote the book, has said in interviews that I've heard that basically that web forum that originally published all this stuff, and then the Serpo website, which was made to contain those postings on our website, and that was run by the guy from Project Camelot. Anyway, they invited more experts to confirm. They were sort of put it out that, like, if you worked on these projects and you know more, you can tell us anonymously. So apparently they got more info from some people, but it's not published in the main documents. But I think the Len Kasten guy who wrote the Serpo book and the people behind the
website,
the comic
Camelot,
book, all of those things.
Yeah.
Like I think there might be a little bit more information because it's sort of like there's details in the comic book that don't really appear in the original postings as I read them. Like all these kind of anecdotal stories about stuff that happened on the planet. Like some of them are talked about by the original poster, like the thing about their encounter with various animal species.
Yes.
And they're sort of experiencing of different parts of the planet.
Frightful one
Yeah.
of a very large snake and the snake was aggressive and they killed it. It had very human eyes.
Yeah, and aggressive armadillo type creatures apparently
But
too.
no. Apparently, no. They were not aggressive.
No, the armadillo ones were not the snake. The
The
snake.
snake
Snakes
was
freaked them out.
very
It freaked them out.
aggressive. They said, "I don't know. We'll have to We'll have to. Okay.
Well, no,
I'll
but
have to."
they found one kind of species that reminded them of armadillos, and they were really vicious. And Ebens had a sound beam weapon
Yes,
that scared them
that's
away.
right. That's true. That
Um,
he speaks truth.
so yeah,
Oh, I know what else about the snake with human eyes.
yeah.
Human eyes. Okay,
And
and they let the they were allowed to dissect the snake later,
As
and they
far as I
looked at
understand,
the eyes, and they were the same. Anyway,
similar
strange.
to human eyes in
Yes.
terms of their evolution. Yeah. Yeah, apparently they actually asked permission of the Ebens to kill the snake, and they said, "Yeah, okay, go ahead, do it." And then they were allowed to dissect it, but
yes.
they wanted to try
To
and eat
eat
its
it.
meat, and the Ebens said, "No, what the fuck? Like, you're not going to eat it. That's ridiculous. We're not letting you eat this thing."
I kept
And like the
thinking,
humans went down with that.
why
Like,
would they want to? I wouldn't want to eat a snake with human eyes.
well, I mean,
Oh my gosh!
I think you have to remember that these
They're
are
on-
1960s people.
And they
With
made
a
meat
1960s kind of
Oh, is it a
perception
hunter?
of how dangerous that might be to just eat some strange meat. Like, I don't know. I mean, presumably
But
they
even-
had
like-
doctors on staff, like
They did,
like
they did.
in the group that went, like they
Yes.
were doctors. So
Yes.
I guess they
And
figured out it would
linguists.
be okay to eat, but like anyway, even said no go on that. So
Fair enough.
there was no snake eating.
Fair enough.
But,
I
like,
wouldn't. I think that's fair enough. I think we're gonna stop there. Fair enough. Okay, so I'm going to read this from the anonymous. So this anonymous emails that you left with me, good Chris. So this is weird. I just randomly picked it out.
Basically, that's a printout of all
Correct.
the original posts, the thread that was on that UFO board where this happened.
Okay.
Like what happened is like to save it for posterity. The guy put it up on
Smart.
Serpo.org,
Right.
and that website is actually no longer being
Right.
paid for, so it's actually not there.
Okay.
But people saved a copy of it, and this is that. So
Right.
this is what that website
Right.
was originally.
Um.
So these are the original words from that leaker who really mostly spilled most of that story.
Right.
So that's what you're reading.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to read. This is intense. And I don't know what it is. As I said, I randomly picked this out. So it says, we meet our English-speaking doctor. This is when they're on the planet. We saw many other Ebens, all experiments done inside the building. He didn't call it a laboratory, just a building, is done to create cloned beings. We were led into another room where there were rolls of containers looking like glass bathtubs. Inside each bathtub were bodies. I was shocked, as were 700 and 754.
And they each were given a number to make them anonymous to history.
Okay.
This was a military deal.
Okay.
And they had all this weird sort of
I like
military
that.
brainwashing shit going on.
Fair enough. So do you think they actually referred to each other as this?
They did. Well, look, they did in the comic book.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, that I wouldn't say that's total confirmation that that's
Right.
exactly how their discourse works, but like
Yes, but that was
certainly
what was
in
used.
the postings from the original poster, he does refer to different code numbers for some of the particular, I guess you call them astronauts, like star voyagers. I mean, I don't know what the hell these people
Okay,
were.
I gotta read the whole thing a little bit more. So it starts, we landed on the roof. So they would tool around in these, and now I'm speaking From what I remember
They
of
described
lead
them as being something like a
helicopter.
helicopter. But
Yeah.
then they got a bit vague and said it didn't have a spinny rotor on the top. It was
No.
sort of different,
So
but
yeah.
yet like a helicopter. Exactly how that's like a helicopter if it doesn't got that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
And
apparently,
they
like a
could tool
helicopter.
around in it
Yeah.
themselves too, so they knew how to work.
Yeah. No. They had pilots.
Oh, they had always had.
They like
escorts,
the
or no?
military, right? So like, yeah, part of the team was trained pilots. They
No,
learned
yes,
to fly
I know
the.
that part, but I'm
Yeah.
saying once they got there, they were more or less a non, or they weren't.
They were kind of allowed to go
but
mostly wherever they
even
wanted.
yes, she was the
Yeah.
interpreter, and she would meld problem or solve problems.
She seemed to go around with them most of the time.
Yes,
it seemed like
they liked
obviously
her.
that it was sort of essentially her role to kind of be their liaison,
Right.
you know, and that's why she had all the language training and all the abilities.
So I just
But,
want to
like,
ask you.
the leader of the
I want to
expedition-
ask you this about what I read. So he didn't call it a laboratory, just a building. It is done to create cloned beings. And it goes on to say they were shocked, strange looking bodies, not human bodies, at least not all of them.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, apparently
And
the Ebens filled in the humans that basically
that's what they were into.
Their history was originally they evolved on a different planet, not Serpo. And that planet eventually went all volcanic. But luckily, by the time that happened, they already had spaceships, so they were able to like go. And Serpo is where they sort of landed, but they didn't evolve on Serpo. But they can't live on the planet where they evolved. And the other thing about their history is apparently they fought some 100-year-long massive planet-on-planet war with some unnamed species that apparently they completely eliminated with particle beam weapons.
Okay.
And that's freaky. So, yeah.
Well, okay, let's put it this way. We can definitely say they were more highly evolved, perhaps.
Well, apparently, since the war, they'd basically gone anti-war, and they weren't warring no more.
Yes.
But they killed all their enemies. Each and every last baby. They're dead. God, planet, bird, whatever.
Yes.
No explanation. But apparently, for the last few thousand years, they've been traveling all over the galaxy, really. And they've been collecting biological samples from all over the fucking place. And that's what's in that lab. It's just weird creatures they found like from all over the galaxy that they're tinkering around with their DNA, because that's what the Ebens they like toying with weird DNA. Like that's their deal. They clone shit. Like that's what they do for fun, it seems.
Did we talk about the death and what they were going
to...
Well,
we did talk about it in terms of...
but we didn't go further.
About the guy freaking out and the whole conflict around it. But yeah, like basically it became clear that the Ebens were totally into all this monkeying around with DNA shit.
They took the body. Yeah. They would not release the body.
Yeah.
They got very upset, the militaries. The numbers.
Interestingly, I listened to one of Len Caston's interviews on Coast to Coast.
Yes.
And he kind of implied that at one point the Serpo crew got to see the clone that was made from their dead guy.
Gosh.
And apparently, like, it was really super weird because it had sort of like human-like hands, human-like feet, but it sort of mostly had a sort of like a even kind of body, and the head was kind of sort of neither. And apparently, like, so, but, I mean, that's not in the website. Whoa, I don't know if it's in the Len Caston book, but, like, he did also imply that there was a bit more info that came in from some Southern experts that aren't necessarily on the website.
What is Len Caston about, I wonder? Just, side.
As far as I understand, I mean, he's a journalist. On the Coast to Coast AM interview, he sort of said that, yeah, he'd had a military career, but he was out of it. And basically his first UFO encounter was when he was in the military on some base. But I think that just sort of sparked a lifelong interest. And later in life, he started writing books about it and researching and stuff. So I think he's essentially a researcher, you know, in the UFO paranormal angle of things. Like I'm not quite sure. I think with him it's probably mostly UFO related, but I
Right.
believe there's a couple books. And like
Oh,
on the
okay.
interview, like
On Planet Serpo or from
oh no,
Cast?
I think he's
Yeah.
had some other books that weren't on Serpo. I think he's
Right.
got a Serpo
Correct.
book, but I think
You,
he's done
okay.
other books.
Yeah.
He seems like a smart guy. You know, I find his interviews to be perfectly interesting and relevant. But anyway, Serpo's the interesting part, obviously.
Yes. Wait a minute. Back to Serpo, kids. So on Planet Serpo, they took all these clocks, and they couldn't. Time was so different that eventually, honest to
They
God, they
lost
gave
it.
up. Yeah.
Apparently
They
it was like a
stopped.
year or two in.
They couldn't,
Yeah.
and they would actually forget to even. But they had one like sort of master clock that then the batteries ran out, and so they didn't know the original time
You
of
know,
Earth time. As far as
Also, like they had all this like 1960s technology, right?
yes,
So,
but on
like
the other
now,
hand,
if you were go to Serpo, you'd get your fucking battery that
They would,
lasts 10 years and your atomic clock thing
Right,
that's the biggest
okay.
an iPhone. You know, like that would be no problem now, but like they left in 1965, so they were dealing with like battery operated clocks and
Right.
some like wind up watches essentially.
sure,
Um,
which
yeah,
I forget to
apparently,
wind up.
like the day cycle on Serpo
Yes.
is a bit weird because there's two
Two
suns.
suns, so it's never fully dark.
Yeah, and it's not the same length of light and
No,
dead dark every
no.
day. There's this sort of weird patterns to it.
And the way
generally the days are like 40 hours long, like if you
Yes.
measure them in human hours. Like so, it's a bit of a weird schedule.
Ebens wear a belt around them, and it tells them when they go to work, when it's time to go and rest. And that is when
It's kind of like their Star Trek communicator, I think.
yeah,
Like, but it gives you orders as well.
it does. And everybody had a place and did a thing, and you knew your thing. And that was in terms of their resting time. That was the one place that Earthlings weren't meant to go into anybody's home while they were resting. That was private time.
Yeah, they were kind of precious around their kids too. They didn't really trust the child Ebens around the humans that much. Like apparently they got in trouble for trying to take pictures of the babies.
Right.
And it was sort of like the military Ebens came over. It's like, fuck that, you don't do that. Like basically everything except that. So they never did again. Apparently there are pictures that exist that they took. Apparently when they came back to Earth, that they brought back like thousands of pictures. Apparently this all exists in some secret vault somewhere. There's pictures of the Eben children's and lots of pictures of the Ebens in their everyday life and stuff.
Where
they probably had trained photographers on the team. Like I imagine that was one of the subspecialties that they
maybe that's right.
Well, I think documenting it would have been a part of their mission.
Yes, of course.
And apparently when the 7 that returned came back, they were debriefed for like years.
Right.
Like I think they came back in 78. I think I read that they were not fully free of the whole thing until about 1984.
Gosh.
So I guess it went on for about 6 years. I don't know if the briefing was that long, but basically it was very complicated. They recalled everything that happened that they could get out of their memory. And apparently there's 7,000 page summary of it that exists that someday maybe we'll get to read and hear like what's. I gotta think if they admit that Serpo actually happened, and we're not there yet.
No,
if we got
definitely not there.
I would think that there's nothing really all that sensitive about that stuff, and the historical significance of it would be sort of undeniable. They could probably redact a few details if they wanted to, but like, as far as I understand, like the returning, whatever the hell we call them, so that came back from Serpo, like they were essentially trying to document everything that had happened. Like for historical purposes as much as anything else. And also for human intelligence agency types to know as much as they can about what the deal is with those Ebens. And in all tellings that I've heard, I mean, Ebens are sort of humans' buddies. Like they're sort of unambiguously helpful to us, have never really done anything too nasty. And have been fairly generous.
They kept the body.
Yeah, well, I know, but that's also a bit cultural. Like they maybe like they're obviously into doing bastards with bodies of all sorts, right? So I can see how they didn't really quite understand those sensitivities, and I think we have to understand that. Like
right,
Eben's
but
got it
in the
even,
weird
right?
answer,
That's how they roll.
yes, they were an unusual thing, and they had a religious thing, and they believed in it. Source.
I mean, another thing that Len Cassis said in the interview is that he had heard that basically the Ebens had essentially given us UFOs and actually had 4 of their Eben engineers work at essentially Area 51 with human scientists for something like 4 years for them to teach us how to fucking do it. Yeah. Apparently that happened. So apparently then Ebens did that for us. So like they're doing us lots of solids. I think like I'm willing to accept that. That they're probably fairly benevolent, and from what I hear, that not all alien species that humans have encountered are necessarily as benevolent as that.
True that.
Like it seems more and more there's like hints of a politics to the galaxy that we exist within. Yet I kind of really struggle to want to know the contours of how we fit into that, because it's not at all clear.
I don't think we're
Seems like we're on the bottom rung of it, I would think.
Definitely. We're not. I mean, I don't.
We're like babies, right? We're like hair monkeys, right? Like basically.
Yes, we are. We're just talking apes.
But one thing that's come to me from the whole Eben thing and the story, it's like them Ebens, like they're better than us.
I know. Well, but
like they're kind of what we should be, or hopefully will be, like when we grow up or whatever. Like they're responsible. They kind of do their thing. They're not wreaking that much evil.
No,
it doesn't seem like their society is run by petty bullshit.
Although no, I mean, who am I to judge?
It does seem a little bit structured, for my taste.
Yeah, and I feel like Len felt that way. I mean, that's his feeling. You got feelings as a writer. You get a cloud. The way you.
I think when I heard him talk about it in the interview, it was kind of like he was approaching it as a sort of a God-fearing, patriotic American. It was kind of thinking they should have our Constitution. Those guys, and it's like I'm with him, I guess. I think it's cultural. I think we gotta let the Ebens even, because that's what they do, and basically they know what they're doing more than we know what we're doing. So
that's their planet. That's how they hang.
I mean, they seem like they know how to have fun and they know how to laugh.
They
know how to love, and
they played baseball with them.
Well, they tried to play human baseball, and apparently, they could get the ball once it hit the ground, but to catch it before it hit the ground apparently was sort of tricky. But that was the other thing that came out. It's like
they had entertainment. They had a form.
They like to dance. They like to dance. They like to sing. I mean, that's the thing. Like the descriptions of the humans that went there, they basically really came to appreciate the kind of level of joy that the Ebens seem to get up to, like within their communities, And I think by 13 years or whatever the hell it was, I mean, that's why 2 of them stayed, because they were charming people to live amongst. I think.
Who were the people? Why did? Tell this. Did you?
We told that in part 1. I talked about the guy who caused the problem, and then at the end admitted he was wrong. Yeah, no, we covered all that.
Yes, we covered that. Sorry. I'm backtracking myself.
Can edit this, right? Okay, but anyway, Ebens seem pretty cool, and I'm liking them Ebens, and I would say we pretty much lucked out finding some fairly cool aliens to have as some of our initial contacts that we actually did stuff with.
Just out of curiosity.
And it's kind of like a bit like Star Trek, where humanity was like meets the Vulcans. Well, it might be a bit tangential to Serpo, but I mean, I've definitely heard that Roddenberry, had some interesting kind of connections to those sorts of worlds. Apparently, he was friends with L. Ron Hubbard, and he was friends with Jack Parsons, the guy who started the JPL rocket labs in California, who was a famous occult weirdo. Roddenberry had some interesting connections that were certainly in some fairly refined situations.
True
Like
that.
again, I don't know. I don't know of any particular connection.
According to Len's book, some of the military managed to spy and observe an even couple. Wow.
I was just sort of fascinated to hear that they do. I mean
They do it for pleasure too, kids.
apparently, yeah. It's that might just be one of those sort of biological evolutionary patterns that they have to make reproducing to be sort of an urge.
Because
otherwise, stupid aliens or
right,
beings won't get around to doing it unless they make it good. So that helps perpetuate the species, and it's sort of a general thing that evolution will bring
that
into.
it's pleasure.
Yeah, that's all.
I think that no, but okay, here's another thing about Serpo. The population was small, and
yeah, about 640,000, I think, is the number that they.
Really, it's that small.
Yeah, and Serpo, just a bit smaller than Earth.
Okay,
like
sure.
Not covered in oceans like the Earth is, although it had some
not,
lakes and rivers, like there was water, but
yeah,
not like Earth kind of water.
Underneath water.
Yeah.
Oh, and
but above ground parts as well, like.
Right, where they did not have. Now we're digressing again, but I love it. They did not have fish, but that's where the. Oh, I don't want to talk about this.
Well, they described something that they looked like a 10-inch eel.
Oh, that's
right. That was the closest thing to fish that they saw in the water. Maybe the only live thing they saw in the water. And they speculated that they might be some distant relative of the snake, which makes me wonder if the eels had eyes or something.
Oh, I know.
I don't know. They didn't really get into that detail.
No. They saw a forest. Okay, yes, they saw a forest, and they saw something they said was similar, they thought, to what we would call an evergreen, and that the Ebens milk it.
Yeah, for sap that looks like milk, and it was sort of implied that they got wasted on it, or it was somehow pleasurable for them to do.
They liked it.
Yeah, but they never quite understood if it was an actual drug or if it was just a fashion. Yeah, I don't know. Like the Earth people tried it. I don't think any of them really liked it that much. I don't think the Earth people
generally enjoyed it.
They certainly didn't catch a buzz off it, as far as I heard. But the milk, I think, was weird in their eyes.
Yeah,
that was the implication I got.
They liked some of the fruits.
Yeah,
the humans.
Well, their 10-year supply of army rations basically lasted them 5 years. So I guess they got hungry a lot, because you'd think army rations would be something you could calculate fairly accurately, but with no clocks and no sense of day and night, scheduling your eating was probably a complicated kind of thing. Like their overall day-night cycle, when they still had working clocks on Earth time,
right? It didn't.
They kind of worked out that the days were generally in the range of about 48 hours.
Yeah.
But it wasn't always. It was longer or shorter, and the nights were not really nights, and
because it did not get that dark. And Ebens were called to work. I think they did it twice a day.
Yeah,
they had it.
Each of their settlements had these towers in the middle.
The tower,
with some kind of weird lens.
That had something to do with this, and it would tell you what, and everyone knew what to do.
Basically, it seemed to focus the light from the various suns in particular directions, and the Ebens could sort of read it like a clock.
Right.
I think that was the implication. I'm not sure the humans ever quite figured out exactly the information the Ebens were getting from it, but they understood that it was kind of something that all the Ebens in the community would be paying attention to. And it would sort of mark out things like their dinner breaks and shit. Cause they would eat communally. They would have these little towns, but they didn't have kitchens in their little houses. They had basically this communal sort of mess hall, really, and you'd get all the babies and oldies and the humans all sitting there at rows of tables, cafeteria style, so.
They said they missed things like salt.
Yeah, well, they brought a bunch, but they ran out. It's after 5 years and their rations ran out, they basically had to eat. eat like even food, or else they're going to starve to death, right? Like there's no real choice. So yeah, it was a hard go. Some things made them kind of sick. It took them a while to get used to it.
And
And in the end, like they did find some stuff they liked.
True that.
Fruit of some kind. That was apparently the bomb.
Yeah, and they could,
You know, and Ebens were very accommodating if they found something that they liked. Like they'd bring it in from out of town, basically. Like they'd get it from across the world. We'll just give you all the fruit. I mean, Ebens apparently had like these sort of grow ops for all their food.
Indoor grow
operations. Like hydroponic kind of scenario, growing all these things. You know, so some of these foods they had probably weren't even native to Serpo. Like could have been. Right. You know, the Serpo, the Ebens being these sort of galaxy explorer types, like Star Trek-y types.
Yeah.
You know, like apparently the implication is they've traveled widely in the galaxy.
And I so don't
and they've
see
met
them
a lot
as
of species.
Right.
No,
but that's true.
They know their way
they
around.
entertained many different species on theirs.
Yeah, so whatever this mysterious politics of the galaxy is. I mean, we're probably lucky to have an experienced species sort of take us under their wing a bit.
Are you kidding? I don't think we would have come out of the mud far enough.
They seem to know their way around what the situation. At least that's the implication, and I find that fascinating.
I want to ask this. Maybe this is completely goof, but are Edens and Greys related or not?
No. Apparently,
were they animosity? Were they the ones warring? But that couldn't have been because
the war species has been gone for thousands of years because the Ebens killed each and every damn one of them.
Gone. Apparently. And we'll get your planet too. Didn't they just I
don't know. Over... Like, it gets really vague, but basically clearly stated they were all gone. We killed all of them and now war is over. Happy days. You know, so I mean I think that's how the Ebens roll. Like if you fuck with them, they're gonna fuck right back.
Oh yeah.
Like, you know. They have particle beam weapons. They have science. They have technology. Like, they're vastly beyond us.
Yes, they are.
So yeah,
their batteries powered up everything, and they didn't understand how they work. But apparently, they brought one back.
Yeah, no, the Ebens have been very generous with their technology. At least that's the implication of all this story. That is the implication of everything. You know, and that is really interesting. I mean, it makes me angry because we know the fucking
military's held on to it all.
Is sort of like and probably getting rich as they fucking dribble
it out.
We
know you have free energy.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Like, I've seen a lot of the stuff around 0 point energy and that kind of free energy research that goes on in real life.
In real life.
You know, and the description of the Eben power source almost couldn't be anything but, it really did sound like a free energy kind of thing that a lot of these free energy experts try and build. You know, like that's a bit of a rabbit hole, and it's probably a bit of a digression from this particular conversation.
I don't think that matters because I think
but anyway, like it's a deep rabbit hole. But what did strike me is the description of the device given by Kasten in his book. Definitely made me think of that kind of tech as it has been sort of demonstrated or claimed.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing.
What is Bigelow? What is Bigelow Aerospace? What is...
He seems to be very esoteric in his focus. And like, I would think he probably has his fingers in those pies. Like, again, it's a deep rabbit hole and probably a conversation for another day where I've had a bit of time to research for.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us with that. And please remember, should you want to contact us with your story, you can email us at spacecab13@gmail.com. See you next week.